Hello, my name is Irie Pan, professional concept designer and illustrator and a person who lives and breathes concept art. Welcome to Foolproof Concept Painting. I am so excited to have you here. Now, I'll jump into introductions and such in just a second, but before we get started, let's address these three questions. Number 1, what is concept painting? Number 2, what will I get out of this course? Number 3, how exactly can it be foolproof? Let's tackle number 1. When you Google concept painting, this is the result you get. You'll see like all these different kinds of paintings. You'll see like all kinds of colors, all kinds of mediums, environments, characters, whatever, such and such, yada yada. Or if you ever go onto websites like ArtStation and you kind of follow concept art already, you probably have seen stuff that looks like this, or like this, or if you're into animation, you've probably seen this stuff, or that stuff, and this stuff, and character design, like the whole 9 yards. And here's the thing, just like when you Google concept art, all of this can be considered concept art. You see, concept art is really just the architecture of entertainment. To explain that, I'm gonna break that down for you a bit. Let's say you want to build your dream house and you totally have the funds for it, like a gajillion dollars. And so you hire a construction team. You buy the materials, and then you tell the construction workers, okay, let's build this house. But then the construction worker, he's just gonna look at you, and he's gonna go, what? What do you mean, build this house? And you say, what do you mean, what do you mean? You guys are supposed to specialize in building houses, right? So build my dream house. And then the construction worker, he'll just stare at you and he'll say, I have no idea what your dream house is. I can't read your mind. And then you guys both get into a fist fight. Until this third person comes along, known as the architect, and he says, oh hey, here, why don't I draw your dream house? You can just tell me what it looks like. I'll draw it out, and then the guy over here, he can build it. And therefore you hire this architect, and he draws exactly what you want. A 27-floor mansion with 3 pools, a dog park, a private video game cafe, and a giant water slide from the top floor all the way to the bottom. Perfect. Now the construction worker looks at this drawing, and he builds your dream house. Poof. Ta-da! That is what a concept artist does. Except in this case, you're not building a giant house. The thing you're building is a giant animated movie, or it's a video game, or it's an environment, or it's just the single character, or it could even literally be the hat of the character. Essentially, whatever it is, you need to be able to visually communicate to the construction workers, which in this case would be 3D modelers, what exactly they need to be making. And this is why when you Google concept art, you see so much different variety. Because truly, they are all concept art. They all visually communicate something. But now you can categorize them. Some concept art is just for characters. Some are for environments. And other pieces are for key cinematic moments. Which leads me to the next question. What will I get out of this course? Well, you clearly didn't come here to learn how to sculpt a nose or play the violin. This course is dedicated to teaching you the techniques on how to create concept paintings. The goal is not to limit you to just cinematic concept paintings or just environment concept paintings either, but rather know the method so that you can create whichever you'd like, whether it's for work or for fun. Which brings me to question 3. How can I make it foolproof? Now, unfortunately, there is no secret ingredient to becoming an amazing artist. We don't have super soldier serums to create the next Captain America. We don't have a sorcerer's stone of immortality. And we also don't have radioactive spiders to give you superpowers. Trust me when I say I would have taken this kind of stuff if it existed. But Just like making a pizza, there is a specific step-by-step process that you can go through. You don't just look at a pizza and just create it out of thin air by tossing ingredients into a pot. You have to make the crust first, and then you make the sauce, and then you put on the toppings. Concept art is the same. There is a method, a guideline, a recipe you could argue, to allow you to create strong paintings every single time. Now with anything, practice is needed. Your first few pizzas may not look like the best, but with time, you'll be making delicious meals to wow your friends, and the more comfortable you get, the more you can change things up. Maybe you'll change the base of your pizza, or you'll try a new sauce, or different toppings, or you'll put the toppings into the crust, or do a deep dish pizza, which, by the way, in my opinion, is the most superior pizza, and who knows? But the same thing applies to painting. Once you know the basic structure and formula, you will be able to do whatever you want from here on. That is what makes it foolproof. And there, I've answered all 3 questions. I hope that piques your interest a little bit, because we have a lot to cover, and it's gonna be a really fun ride. Therefore, without further ado, let's get started. Alrighty. Let me tell you exactly what this course is going to entail. And since we're going to be spending the next few, what I assume to be weeks together, let me introduce myself a little bit further. Hello, my name is Irie Pan, but you already know that. As of this recording, I am a professional concept artist in the entertainment industry, and I have worked on stylized feature animation with Netflix, as well as TV animation with Warner Brothers and Titmouse. I also work in the video game sector on AAA IPs with companies like Activision on titles like Call of Duty, as well as with Blizzard, and with Turtle Rock Studios on Back 4 Blood. Additionally, I worked with live action companies, theme park companies, and I also work as an illustrator both domestically and internationally. Concept art to me isn't just a job, because it's a passion of mine. And it's very likely that it is yours as well. Our industry isn't one that people are usually forced into. We're not exactly accountants or private equity business analysts or accident lawyers. And you're probably like me in the sense that we really enjoy art and want to essentially just get better at it. Therefore, I always put learning at the top of my priority list because my craft brings so much meaning to my own life. And knowing the right method and perfecting that method will keep all of us improving. So let's run quickly through what that is. The first thing is to understand black and white value structures. The second would be composition. Next would be color and lighting. And then into painting techniques to help the image to get to a higher fidelity. And then photo bashing techniques, where we go for the highest level of fidelity. And lastly, speed painting. If you had to compare this to a pizza, because I love pizzas, I would say that the black and white values and composition is like the dough. So I'm just gonna draw a pizza like this, pretend it's a pizza. And then your color and lighting would be the sauce. And all the painting techniques, all 3 of these right here, these would be the toppings. And if you put them all together, then they make one pizza. Also, trust me, you're gonna be hearing a lot of pizza analogies from here on, but hopefully you find that a good thing. Now, I'm gonna quickly explain why exactly it's formulated the way it is, by starting off with the black and white values. Black and white values are honestly kind of the pillar of picture making. They inform us about shadows, and thus they inform us about light. We can use lines to convey information, like Dean Cornwell is doing here. Or we can just use really big shapes. And they're typically the first thing that will turn into an art director. It would usually be some form of black and white composition. Afterwards, composition determines our audience and our constraints. If it's a painting made for movies, then it's going to be a film length ratio. Or if it's a video game, it will be 1920 by 1080, standard monitor size. Or if it's for phone, it will be a vertical format. But if we want a movie, so like a super long lengthy movie, but we deliver all of our paintings vertically, it will be a disaster. Because if the 3D modeler builds your painting off exactly, like pixel by pixel, either a majority of your painting is cut off or a majority of your screen is cut off, which is of course not good. Which is why we're gonna discuss composition to properly remedy that. Afterwards, color and light breathes life into work, and for obvious reasons tells you the color of whatever it is that you need to make. But it can also create moods, tell you stories, and make your painting visually spectacular. Lastly, the technique delivered in your painting will bring it to a higher fidelity. It will make things clear and also help you speed up your process so that you don't have to draw every single brick on the wall or waste half of your life trying to detail every single tiny little leaf. And that is the reason why this class is formulated the way it is. This looks like a lot of stuff to cover, but I'm going to break it down for you over the length of this course. And we're going to start off with one of the core ingredients of our concept art pizza dough, which is black and white values. In almost all of the painting classes that I ever took, we were always started off in black and white. Now, in one of the classes I took, I remember in our first week, we were sent to go out plein air painting at a graveyard, because that is the best place to paint anything, clearly. And we had to do 20 paintings all in purely 3 colors, black, white, and gray. Some of the students were kind of grumbling because they were like, oh, my work isn't turning out good because I don't have like color to work with. I don't have like blue, I don't have green, so I can't make anything cool and pretty. And then our teacher walks over. He's like a really tall man and he wears like this hat. He walks over and he does a quick few strokes on that student's canvas. And then suddenly, ba-bam! A graveyard being hit with light appeared on their canvas with trees in the background, all in only black, gray, and white, and also only in like 45 seconds. How did he do it? We will get back to that in just 1 second, I promise. One of my favorite statements that I've ever heard, and I'm so sad because I'm not able to pinpoint exactly who said this, told us as a class that black and white does all the work. Color takes all the credit. To really emphasize that, let's take a look at these 3 objects. Here I have black and white and gray on the left side, and on the right side I have green, red, and blue. Now the human eye is actually incredibly perceptive to value as opposed to being perceptive to color. Because with value, we are actually able to perceive if things are closer or further away. There's a lot more science that I can kind of go into, but essentially, we developed it because when it's dark at night, we need to be able to differentiate what is closer to us and what is not closer to us. Because if something is chasing us in the dark, then it's a lot more important that we can see what is in front of us rather than what the color is of the thing in front of us. So it's a biological thing from the very beginning. Therefore, if let's say that I turn this square, so on the left side, this square, I turn it really bright, then it immediately becomes really close to the circle. We've effectively brought it closer to us as the audience, and vice versa. If I turn this square darker, so like this, somewhere around here, then I pushed it further back. It now feels like it's closer to the back rectangle than it does to the front white circle. Unfortunately, color doesn't really work the same way. Let's say that we turn this blue square to a shade that's a little bit closer to red, which would be purple. But as you can see, it doesn't really feel closer or further away. We can even turn it a little bit more towards pink, but it doesn't feel like it's closer. Like the depth does not really read very well. And vice versa, if I change it to a more greenish color, it also doesn't read like it's getting closer or further away from anything, which is honestly a really big problem, because in order to build pieces that are believable, we need to make the viewer feel as if something is closer or further away. But with these colors, where it's all just flat colors, they all feel incredibly flat. To further emphasize this, let's go into our circle. I'm actually going to just make a quick shade, and immediately, just with that simple stroke, you start to see that the circle becomes a sphere. Whereas if I go into my red circle here, and let's say I use a blue, and I paint onto the red, unfortunately, it does not really have the same effect. We don't really read this red circle as a sphere, but rather we read it as a really badly drawn Pepsi logo. There's really no good way for me to take this red circle and turn it into a sphere without using a color that is effectively darker than the original red color, which is the exact same thing as the sphere on the left, where we use a darker color. We're using a darker value. Therefore, my point is that black and white values deliver us so much more information than what color alone could ever do. It's also why you can view a movie in purely black and white, but you'll never see a movie in just pure saturated color. Your brain just doesn't work that way. We need to see what's darker and what's lighter. That will tell us not only which items are which, but it'll also tell us the form through light and shadow. Now, we're gonna head back to my teacher's painting. I'm gonna show you a super simplified version of what he did, but because he did it in 45 seconds, I'm basically doing it in 45 seconds as well. He started off by placing down the strongest shadows for the gravestone, by having a strong foreground, and then he put in cast shadow for the gravestone. And then he adds in the medium shadows, and bam! Immediately, just using these three colors, we can tell that there's kind of a scene, like a little tiny environment going on. We have this gravestone being hit by light. In the background, we have some trees being dotted, and we have this little patch of grass in the front. And this is all achievable only using three values: black, white, and gray. So why does this matter to us concept artists? Well, number one, a lot of times the director will want to see a thumbnail painting in black and white. They want to see essentially a sketch before we deliver the final painting. It's usually faster to ask artists to draw in black and white, and it gives a very clear idea of what the scene will look like. It provides all information in terms of depth and clarity. In fact, for Netflix, if I were to deliver a painting, I would first deliver a black and white version of my painting, and then after I get an okay from my director, then I will take the painting to full color. You'll also see this in video games, such as for splash art illustrations. Typically, for the artist, a couple of black and white sketches will be made to present to the art director, and then the art director will probably go through and he'll be like, okay, yeah, I like this one and this one, maybe like a little bit of this one or something like that. Or maybe he'll be like, oh, let's do a different pose, or let's change the hair, or let's change the lighting angle. All kinds of stuff. Same thing with character design. They say that in the good character design, you should always be able to clearly see blocks of value in the character so that its different parts are clear and understandable. This is obviously very hastily done, but with Tracer you could effectively break her down into these few core block shapes. And this is what makes her recognizable on the field. Of course, the color is still very important, but without the value, then everything will just merge together into one amorphous blob. You can see here in early designs for characters in games such as Mass Effect and Metal Gear, the designs are black and white to start off with. But most importantly, number two, the more understandable a painting looks in black and white, the more understandable and better the painting will look like in color. It's like the driving test for concept art. If you can't pass the black and white benchmark, it won't be understandable in its final form. Don't forget, we're not making fine art in this class. We're trying to make things as clear and understandable as possible for our audience. We are the architect. And there is nothing more clear and understandable to our brains than values. Let's take a look at some of my favorite examples. These are screen caps from the movie Yojimbo, directed by the legendary filmmaker Akira Kurosawa and cinematography by Kazuo Miyagawa. You can see whenever it's a dark character, they'll use a light to highlight the characters out. For example, we have this very dark character silhouetted against a very light background. The same thing you'll see in this picture right here, where the character is all very dark, silhouetted against this really nice foggy background. This makes the character visually distinct, so he pops out right onto the page and you can see it clearly from a mile away. Again, dark character against a light background. It's so simple and clear, and the fog that rumbles through this piece is completely intentional. They did it so that the character would be able to stand out. Or let's go to the opposite, where you have a super dark background, but then the characters are incredibly light. In fact, if you squint your eyes, you could even argue that there's basically two values going on here. We have the gray of the foreground, and we have the black of the background. Because it is so simple and precise, that is exactly what makes this image so readable and so clear. When you get to a more complicated scene like this, you'll notice that the main character in the very middle, his hair is an incredibly dark shade of black to make him stand out against this white-ish background. And these other characters here, they have black shoes to be able to make them distinct from the white ground. Additionally, almost all of the characters have some form of black hair in order for them to stand out against, again, the lit white background that is being lightened through the usage of fog. And here's another one. At this point, you probably know exactly what I'm going to say and point out. You have this light character and a light foreground all against an incredibly dark background, where you can break up the values into simply 1 and 2. Or if you wanted to be more precise, you could probably break it down into 1, so the lightest here, and then 2, a medium gray, and then 3, a super dark black. Once you move to modern day colored movies, the same principle stands. For example, in Road to Perdition, one of my favorite Tom Hanks movies, the legendary cinematographer Conrad Hall captures these great moments where, again, the characters are incredibly distinct. And you'll see the exact same kind of techniques that Yojimbo used, where you've got this dark character against an incredibly light background. And again, a dark character against a light background. In this case, Conrad Hall took it a step further by purposefully placing Tom Hanks right here against this window, so that this super bright window gets the contrast with his super dark coat and shoulder. This immediately draws our eye right to Tom Hanks' character. Or this scene here. Even though this character in the front is completely blurry and fuzzy, we're able to tell exactly what the features of this character are because he's wearing these very distinct white sleeves against a very distinct dark vest and then a lit face. So that even though the camera is not focused on him, we can see exactly what he's supposed to be. And in more complicated scenes, such as nighttime where there aren't any good sources of light, you'll see that the movie makers used the fog that is created when rain hits the floor to really highlight what is happening. So you can see the clear outline of the car because of that rain. And even more so, just on the character here, you can see that there's a slight rim light off his hat. It is so masterful, like, oh my god, chef's kiss. Just the light hitting off his hat to make his silhouette distinct from the background. It's absolute genius. And you're probably wondering, well, I bet that happened by accident. There's no way that was intentional. It was coincidence. The light just hit him that way. But come on, these cinematographers, they get paid millions of dollars. Like, there is no way that this is a coincidence. One of the most famous cinematographers out there, Roger Deakins, his net worth is $84 million. They literally studied and calculated this stuff. Sure, sometimes it might be a coincidence, but do you really think Hollywood is going to pay $84 million for just a coincidence? Absolutely not. The same thing applies to things in animation, where all the lights are now digital and they're not physical. Therefore, they can be even more fine-tuned. Check out Toy Story 4 right here, where this window, you'll see, is strategically placed behind Bo Peep, so that she, who is on a darker side, is lit by the background of this window, so that she's silhouetted essentially. The opposite occurs with Woody, where he is being hit by a slight rim light, so that you can see his silhouette really clearly as well. In fact, you can even see this principle in the color key paintings by one of our very own Schoolism teachers, Daisuke Tsumi. A lot of people think that what makes these images all work is the fancy lighting or the colors, which, oh, absolutely, that's definitely true because Daisuke Tsumi is amazing at lighting and color. But the bulk of it, I would argue, the bones, is actually the black and white value structure. Because not only is Dice an incredible painter when it comes to color, but also notice that he's using these rim lights here to allow for these characters to be silhouetted against the background. Or even right here, the light hitting off Woody's face down towards his chin and using this slightly darker little background piece right here to be able to highlight and really make him pop out. Similarly to the way that we saw Akira Kurosawa pop his characters out in the movie Yojimbo. Or check out how his boots are a darker shade in order for Woody to pop out there. And when you turn the piece into black and white, see how clearly it reads, even in black and white. You've got a little bit of rim light off Buzz Lightyear so that this little toy character is really able to stand out. And you have this tiny little rim light on the hat of this character here, so that she can stand out. And by having all these different pieces of light and having it be different from the background, we're able to read this as different characters standing next to each other, even though this scene is quite complicated. That is part of the genius in this piece. Now let's take a look at a few others where I feel like the pictures aren't working. It's actually really difficult to find pictures that don't work. Because to be quite honest, if you don't get this down, it's actually quite unlikely that they would be hired. Typically, this is a skill that is considered to be the standard. So it was insanely difficult for me to actually find examples where there's a very poor black and white value structure. But I did do some digging, and I'm not trying to point any fingers, but that being said, I would probably point to the movie Strange Magic. Here you can see these two characters talking, but something about this piece is incredibly busy. If we turn this piece into black and white, if you squint your eyes, these two characters get completely lost. For example, this character here is pretty much the exact same value and shade as the background. This character as well, where their pants basically are the exact same value as the background, and so these characters just completely blend in. To really emphasize this, to help you understand, let's compare it to the movie Up, where it's pretty much the exact same thing. They use a similar color palette, which is a more neutral color palette, and it's about two characters standing next to each other. But in this piece, it's so much easier and so much more palatable. But let's really see why. If you turn this piece into black and white, you'll see that this character really pops out of the background. She is being completely lit, and against the black background, we have this very clear silhouette of these two characters. Even the background is being silhouetted, where you have this big chunk of background, so this like side here, and then you have this side of the background, which is all white. This is all completely intentional. Now let's compare the two together. So if we put them side by side and then turn it into black and white, your eye should naturally follow the piece from Up instinctively because it has a stronger value contrast, and so we're able to read the image more clearly, and thus your eye will just naturally go to the thing that is most understandable. Here is another example. Again, the left side is from Strange Magic and the right side is from Up. If you just look at these two pieces directly, your eye again should naturally flow to the piece of Up. Or at the very least, if your eyes don't naturally flow to the piece of Up, then they should be able to understand the piece of Up more. This is because if you turn the piece into black and white, the problem of the values in Strange Magic is accentuated. The main character here kind of just fades into the background. If you look at their shoulder, you see that this value basically blends in with the value of the background, or here and here. Here and here, here and here, here and here, here and here, basically everywhere. The character doesn't have anything to silhouette it, whereas in comparison, and up, there's a very clear line and distinction of where the character is supposed to be. You can see that this character's hair is black against this white background, therefore it's so obvious where his silhouette is, or even the rocks in the background. Because of such a simple sky, the rocks, which are darker, also stand out very well. Therefore, a piece doesn't need to be super complicated to ever be considered good. What it needs to be most of all is understandable. Also, please don't get me wrong, the people who worked on Strange Magic are absolutely incredible. It was very difficult to find anything at all in movies that did not work very well value-wise. But for the sake of trying to teach something, I do think that some movies have done it better than others. But know that movies are really hard to make. At the very least, you can still tell that there is a character here. But realistically, we really should be aiming towards this. Just to let you know. Now, whenever I'm painting, I always love to check back and forth to see how my painting looks in black and white. Essentially, that is what makes a painting powerful or not. Therefore, let's dive into this concept a little bit more and see how we can make our black and white values stronger. When it comes to deciphering black and white values, there are two main ways: no-tan versus chiaroscuro. Yeah, I know, two fancy words right off the bat. Let's start, however, with no-tan. No-tan is a Japanese design concept involving the play and placement of light and dark elements as they are placed next to each other in the composition of art and imagery. Okay, but what the heck does that mean? It's actually really simple. It just means putting light stuff and dark stuff right next to each other. That's the concept, but what we typically mean today is actually differing local values. Don't worry, I promise I'll explain more. Now, the concept of no-tan derives from Japanese origin and is a Japanese design concept because in traditional Japanese woodblock print, artists were only really able to paint in flats. Rather than the Western style where people would actually mix paint together, in Japanese woodblock printing it made a lot more sense to just use a flat color since you were essentially just stamping it on. This means that the hair would be black, the skin would be another tone, and then the shirt another tone as well. Same thing here, you can see the skin is all one shade, the hair is all one shade, and then the shirt is either a red or a yellow, but they're all flat blocks of color. Let's take a look at Hokusai, one of the most famous ukiyo-e painters. You'll see that he's essentially painting only with local value. Local value means, what is this item with no shadows? So in this piece by Hokusai, you can see that in the wave, all the foam is one color, which is white, whereas the water is completely blue. And then the boat is another single solid color. And on the painting to the right, you'll see that the horse is a solid block of red, the humans are a white, and again, the foam of the water is white, and the water itself is blue. Additionally, the trees are a mixture of green and yellow. There isn't much shading going on necessarily, and each of these items are painted exactly one flat color. If you had to ask me if there was a light source in this piece, I wouldn't really say there is one, because the lighting is completely flat throughout. Let's take a look again at these two paintings. You'll see that just as I mentioned earlier, every single component of this painting are painted with a very flat value. And they're colored specifically with the local value. So essentially, what is this item without shadows? Well, in that case, hair without shadows is still just black. A skin without any shadow would just be this one solidified pale yellow-white color. And the same thing with the shirt. Or this guy's plaid robe. This is the idea of no-tan, having these strong black and white elements next to each other. You'll see that the hair is a much darker color and it stands out starkly against the lighter skin. Now let's compare this to Rembrandt. Rembrandt was very famous at his time for his usage of light and shadow. In fact, if you had to ask anyone on the street about an artist who was just completely specialized in light and dark, most people would probably say Rembrandt. Let's quickly turn his paintings into black and white, and you'll see that there's a really strong usage of light and dark. Notice how this entire section right here is completely covered in essentially darkness. And then this little patch of skin is light. Or here as well, a giant patch of light skin versus a giant patch of a darker shadow. What differs Rembrandt's technique to a Japanese ukiyo-e painter is that the skin here, this shade right here, is the same exact value as the hair right there. Or for this man's skin, this darker tone skin, is the same kind of value as the darker tone of his frill or ruffle. So it almost disregards what the local value of the original object is. And instead, Rembrandt favors using light and dark to describe the shadow and light forms that light is casting onto his characters. It doesn't matter that the skin is a lighter color or that the shirt is a darker color. When he paints shadow, it all falls into darks. This is the concept of chiaroscuro. Chiaro means light, and roscuro means dark. Together, it means, well, light and dark, and has a Latin and Italian or Western origin. So if you compare it to Notan, this is what you should see. Let's quickly turn it into black and white. In Notan, the black and white values are determined by the local value, so the skin and the hair. However, in chiaroscuro, the values are determined by light, here, in the shadow. And now, to make it even easier, we don't even need to call it Notan and chiaroscuro. We can call it simply local value and shadow value instead. Much simpler. Although, if you go to your friends and start saying Notan and chiaroscuro, you can totally flex your cool art knowledge. So those are the two basic and main ways to categorize your black and white values. But let's talk about how to actually apply this to our own painting, because in real life, we're not going to see either just Rembrandt paintings or Japanese woodblock paintings. Everything is actually on a scale. Some paintings are going to be more local value based, whereas other paintings will be more shadow value based. And some paintings are really just smack in the middle. So you get to decide when to use which method. And also, think about which one would suit you more. Notan paintings are great for describing the local value of something, so they give a lot of information, whereas chiaroscuro paintings obviously tell you a lot more about light and shadow. So they're great for things like dramatic effect and to convey a certain mood. Let's take a look again at the road to perdition. In this example, you can see the black and white values work because they are separated by local value. You have the boy in his shirt, which is a very stark contrast from the pants, which stand out really well against this ocean right here. Not to mention his hair is also another value, dark black, against, again, this light ocean, which really gets to bring him out in a silhouette. Whereas in this screenshot, I would argue that this is based more off of chiaroscuro. You see, there's light hitting his face and his hair. And you could argue that there is this almost imaginary line right here that separates the light and the shadow. Because he is the only character being lit, you can see that these characters don't really have any lights on them. Your eye will naturally go to this character in the middle. The opposite in this screenshot, where you'll see that everything is separated via local value. White sleeves are white, black vests are black, black suits are black, and white hair is white. And just to prove it to you even more, I'm gonna turn this piece into black and white, and you'll see that everything is basically flat blocks of value and color. All of these images are very orderly and they're designed in a stately manner. Now let's move on from movie frames into actual paintings. Let's check out some artworks by the incredible Ryan Lang. In this piece here that he did for the visual development of the movie Moana, I would argue that this piece is based off of a Notan or local value black and white schematic. This is because the rocks would be one shade, the sand is one shade, the ocean is one shade, and the green is another shade. Yes, you can argue that there are some dark spots here, like some shadow here and there, but overall, if you turn the piece to black and white, the strongest differences in the dark and the light is between things like the rocks, the grass, the sand, ocean, and sky. So these are local value aspects. They are not shadow and light aspects. To explain a little further, let's take a look at another piece he did for Moana, where in this piece, I would argue, it's based off of a chiaroscuro or a shadow light value schematic. In this piece overall, there is this big mass of dark value right here, and another really big mass of a lighter color here. But you'll see that in these two masses, for example, in this dark mass here, it includes Te Fiti, the goddess, as well as Moana, the girl, whereas the light value includes the waterfall's edge as well as the grass, which are all different objects and different things. And just to hit the concept home, you see that if we turn it into black and white, that statement stands true. All of the dark values are because they are in a shadow, whereas all the light values are because they are being hit by a light. Very different from the piece that we were talking about earlier, aka this piece over here. This is the difference between a light and dark value schematic versus a local value schematic. It is super important to recognize these patterns and understand what makes a piece work in black and white. And to really just drive the concept home even further, I've got a super short demo to show you. Here is a photo of Shirley Temple. If I were to paint her using local values, I would paint it like this, where her skin is one value, her hair is another value, and her dress is another value. Whereas if I wanted to paint Shirley according to shadow values, then this is how I would paint. You'll see that the main black and white differentiation is now between the lights and the darks. So just keep that in mind when you're painting your own pieces or doing studies. Ask yourself if the thing that you're looking at is mainly based off of a local value schematic or a light and shadow value schematic. You're never gonna have one that leans completely towards one way or the other. It's always a balance. But typically you want to lean a little bit more towards one side versus the other. Because when you're stuck directly in the middle, it's sometimes a little bit too confusing. The stronger your eye becomes, the more you'll be able to naturally do it yourself. Super quick side story, but I am a huge fan of pancakes. I like to make pancakes a lot myself, and my family has a really fun tradition of pancake Sundays. A few years ago, I saw on the internet that there was this cafe in Japan that served the most amazing pancakes ever. They were like super thick. And I saw it and I said to myself, oh my god, I have to go. So I made sure the first thing I did when I returned to Japan was I went to this cafe. Here are my photos that I took myself personally of the pancakes that I got to eat. Oh my god, it was the most amazing pancake I had ever eaten. It tastes even better than it looks, if that's even possible. But here's the thing. After I ate those pancakes, I realized how subpar my own pancakes were. My homemade pancakes didn't taste anything like these pancakes. They weren't as soft, they weren't as sweet, and their color wasn't this nice either. But now I had a benchmark. Perhaps I'm not able to make pancakes as good as this, but the next time that I made my own homemade pancakes, I kept adjusting my recipe so that it would hopefully get closer and closer to this absolute banger of a pancake. The same thing for art. The reason I'm telling you all this stuff is so that you yourself have a benchmark. You need to develop your own eye to know what is strong black and white values. And then naturally, your own black and white values will improve too, because you have set yourself a standard. And that is so important. So if you ever have a piece you really like, just try turning it into black and white. In fact, let me show you a few ways as to how. Alright, so here we have this piece here and we want to turn it into black and white. One of the first and easiest things to always do is you go up here to image, you go to adjustments, then you go to hue saturation, or you can go to vibrance. Either one of these will work, but let's choose hue saturation. So then I'm just gonna take the saturation all the way down. And that is one method for turning things into black and white. So here's the second way of doing it. So originally you were all the way up here, but now you're going to travel all the way down here. You see we're zooming in just so you can see it better. You're going to click this little half moon and you're going to click hue saturation here. That is your adjustment layer. And then you're going to move the slider to your liking. So the question is, okay, well, what was the difference? Well, the difference is that this is basically kind of like a giant blanket. If I simply took this photo, or not photo, I should say painting, and I turned it into black and white, let's say that here, I'm just gonna draw this stick person right here. clearly they're now a part of the painting, you know, they are very integral to the painting. And I turn my piece into black and white like so. I go into hue saturation, I turn it down like that. But oh no, my stick figure, which is on a different layer, doesn't get turned black and white. That is awful. Oh no, well, whatever shall we do? Well, thankfully, there is this thing called a hue saturation adjustment layer, which is think of it as like a giant blanket. All you have to do is turn it on, so turn on the visibility like so. Ta-da! And now your stick figure is also going to be in black and white along with the original painting. Now, one of my favorite ways to turn things into black and white as well, let me show you an even better way. It just takes a little bit of a setup. The first time will be a little bit difficult, but that's it. It's not even that difficult. I'm really just hyping it too much up here. So you're going to here to view, and then you're going to roof setup, and you're gonna also go for custom. So I'm just gonna click it really quickly. And if you first start off, it's gonna probably set you up with Apple RGB or some other like one of these things. No problem. This is super easy to change. All you gotta do is click it and you go to dot gain 20%. Why specifically 20%? Honestly, I'm not really too sure either. Every single person I've ever talked to has always done dot gain 20%, and it's supposed to be the most accurate. And then you just click OK. So what did I just do? All you have to do now is to click Control Y on your keyboard. So right now, I'm literally just clicking Control Y and I'm flipping back and forth, probably giving a little bit of a headache watching this, but back and forth into black and white. And that is my absolute favorite method. Now, there is no right or wrong way to do any of this stuff. In fact, if you really wanted to be super janky, technically you could take a photo of your screen with your phone. So here's your phone and then this is your computer screen. Take a photo and then go into your photo settings on your phone and change it to black and white. Okay, the options are endless, but hopefully you don't have to resort to that method, and instead you can just click Control Y instead. Once you look at some of your favorite artists' paintings and how they kind of tackle black and white values and understanding like that benchmark, you'll be able to kind of get a grasp and understand values a little bit better yourself. So now let's jump into a recap of everything we did so far. You made it through the first lesson. That wasn't so bad, was it? Now let's take a quick moment to go over everything that we learned in the module so far. If you're anything like me, I have an incredibly low attention span. Sometimes things just go in one ear through the other ear. So I always appreciate when someone can repeat a concept for me, or sometimes I will definitely raise my hand in class and ask, "Hey teacher, can you repeat what you just said?" even though I know that you totally said it like 10 minutes ago. So I'm totally there with you if you're that kind of person. First, we learned what concept art is. It's simply put, clear visual communication. Next, we went over the general outline of this course. We're going to start off with black and white, and then go into composition, then light and color, then painting techniques, and lastly, go into speed painting. We then jumped right back into the lecture for black and white. Black and white is incredibly important for us artists because number one, that's usually what is asked first in the process. We deliver black and white sketches and thumbnails before going into the final color. But more importantly, number two, it makes our art understandable. If artwork does not look good in black and white, no amount of color will ever make it look nice. We can categorize black and white into two categories, no tan and chiaroscuro, or as we call it, loco value versus shadow values. It's a way for us to kind of categorize the way that we put black and whites on the page. Most paintings usually lean towards one or the other, so decide which way you'd prefer your painting to lean towards. Lastly, we learned that we need to train our eyes. Knowing and seeing other great artworks will set a benchmark and standard for ourselves. Now, let's finish this module off with a small demo and your first homework assignment. But don't worry, I promise that it's not going to be painful. Okay, first things first. You're never going to see the word homework in the title ever again. We're going to change it to practice and improvement. Because the idea of homework That just brings back really bad memories for everyone of trying to cram as much algebra into our head as possible, or writing FRQ essays on analyzing Shakespeare's Hamlet for the 5th time. I am not preparing you for an SAT or a bar exam for law school here. Everyone has different lives and everyone has different goals. Some people want to pursue concept art as a profession, but others just want to pursue it as a hobby or to just get better. My job is to teach you the exact methods on how to paint a piece of concept art. But whether or not you wish to implement this process is up to you. And whether or not you wish to improve upon it is also up to you, because everyone's situation is different. But at the very least, I will say this. You can watch a video of a master instructor teaching you on how to perform ballet. But unless you yourself put on your ballet shoes and actually practice those moves, there's no way to actually get better. Art is just like ballet. It's a dance in your fingers. The way you control your hand and the way you integrate your thoughts with your movement, that's all physical, and you have to practice to get better. There's no way of stepping around it. Just because you're not moving your whole body doesn't mean it's not a dance or like doing the splits. You have to develop muscle memory. So I definitely encourage you to do as much practice and improvement as possible. So each week, I'll give you the assignment, and the number is arbitrary. I will give you a recommendation, but you should really do as many as you think is necessary. For example, if you're aiming to become a top professional where your livelihood is going to depend on it, then you should do more. If you're aiming to be a casual hobbyist, then in that case, you can do less. So with that, let's start that beginning transition one more time. So, for this week, I'm going to start you off with a quick quiz. I will show you a screenshot, like so, and then I want you to tell me if the image is primarily separated in local value or by shadow value. And then I want you to paint it for me in only 3 colors: black, white, and gray, in the simplest possible way to demonstrate where you yourself see these value differences. For example, in this screenshot from Saving Private Ryan, if I were to do a black and white painting, this is how I would approach it. Just like so. And then I want you to label whether or not it's shadow value or local value. In this particular case for Saving Private Ryan, it would be considered shadow value because the black and white values are mainly separated in terms of where the shadow is, not the local value. And we're going to do 10 of these. Now, you'll be getting a worksheet for all of this, but just so you're kind of preparing yourself, here are the ones that you'll be doing. You're going to be doing 5 from movies, so 5 screenshots, and then we're also going to be doing 5 different paintings. Next, you're going to do the exact same thing, but with your own screenshots. For example, choosing films from directors like Alfred Hitchcock or Akira Kurosawa. And then you're also going to do them from paintings as well, such as painters such as like Dean Cornwell, John Singer Sargent, and Edouard Manet. Of course, those are just recommendations. You can choose your own favorites, but typically, the more well-known the artist is, the more they usually follow the principles of either local value or with shadow value. So for example, if I chose a screenshot from the movie Yojimbo, this is how I would tackle it. You see only 3 colors: white, gray, and black. I want you to use a shade of white that is obviously, duh, it's completely white, and then a mid shade of gray, and then finally black. Clearly the black isn't showing up because it's against a black background, but here I'm using a super dark gray just to prove my point. But I don't want you to use like a super light gray or a super dark gray. I want you to use a very medium gray. Only this one. Try to go for 50% to really make it as simple for yourself as possible. So now I'm just going to give you a super quick demo on how I like to tackle these black and white assignments. First of all, let's start off with our screenshot. This one is also from the movie Yojimbo, if you still remember. And then I start off with, of course, a canvas that is the identical size of the film aspect ratio, because some films are longer and some films are shorter. So you just want to make sure that you capture the exact same length as your original screenshot. Now, let's go and take a little closer look. Alright, so I always start off, of course, with my canvas. So as you can see, this one would be my canvas. So depending on what value the background or most of the background is, that's where I would start. So in this case and scenario, the background is mostly this kind of light gray. Now, obviously, you can kind of argue that I could start off with gray, but this is what I look at. When I'm looking at this, I think about how am I going to separate this into my 3 values. The first thing I'm going to look at is, well, first of all, obviously, this is my character, and he's kind of like 1 value. And then he also has these little lights shining on his head and his skin. I also see a really distinct value difference between the background here and also the ground. So the mist and haze have different values. And when I compare them together, this ground is lighter color than this shoe that he has, and also it's lighter than his sword, and it's lighter than pretty much like all of these areas here. So essentially that tells me that, okay, the ground is going to be 1 value, the mist is going to be another value, and then finally the dark parts like his sword and like his jacket, that's going to be the 3rd value. So I know I drew all over the screen here, but let me make this a little bit more clear. So essentially it would be, and also let me change my brush to something a little bit more thick. It would be 1, so black right here, and then 2, the mist, and then 3, kind of the shadow ground. Once I realized that, I asked myself, okay, well, these different values that I see on the screen, how are they categorized? Is it local value or is it shadow value? And the easiest way for me to usually differentiate is by looking at the blacks. So I'm looking at the blacks here, and they basically form this mass, kind of like this. And I asked myself, well, this giant mass, does it span over multiple things like jackets and skin? Because technically, if it was local value based, then the blacks should be different depending on what the article of clothing, or if it's skin, or whatever material it is, it should be different. But in this case, it doesn't matter what the material is, it just spans all over him, which means that this is clearly something formed by light. This shadow value is, well, obviously it's shadow value. So that means that this will be considered chiaroscuro, or as we determined, it's going to be shadow-based values. So let's get cracking on our piece. So I'm going to start off with just the ground. I'm choosing a gray that is a middle value. So I'm just going to take a long straight line right here. I'm just going to fill it in. In fact, easier would be using the lasso tool. I love using the lasso tool just for making this straight line, and then using my brush tool to just fill it out like so, kind of like that. Bada beam, bada boom. And now when you look at the original screenshot, you can see that there's a little bit of value creeping in that's black all the way up here, and it's also like some shadow values like here and here. So I'm just going to add that in by gently sweeping in here as well. So just a super gentle sweep. And after that, I'm going to try and paint the character. So I'm still sticking with my gray. I'm just gonna see kind of, his shapes are kind of like this, as you can see. Let me see. Right here, kind of like a circle, a cylinder-ish-esque shape. It's going to look like an awful blob, but that's okay. It'll get better. Trust me. So I'm just going to fine tune it by going in here and doing... And now that we kind of have our general silhouette for this guy, now we can go in and actually fill out our black. So for this character, we want to make sure that we capture the shadow value. So I like to, again, use the lasso tool to just fill out whatever shadow value that I see. And then I'll go in and really fine tune some of the pieces just so I make sure that they are a little bit more understandable. Even though his hand is technically more on the gray value, it kind of disrupts the simplicity of the silhouette because my goal is to make it as clear and understandable as possible. So I'm going to leave the hand in shadow. Afterwards, I'm just going to clean up his silhouette a little bit more so I can be a little bit more accurate. So for example, his legs kind of go out more this way, and boom, you have your samurai. That's pretty much as simple as it needs to get. You can clearly tell this is a human being, and you can clearly tell he's holding a sword and another sword right here. And there's some kind of ground level down here, and that there's some kind of, I suppose, like mist. And that's pretty much it. That's really all you need to do. All right, so super quick, let's just recap what your assignment has been so far. Number 1, it's going to do the quiz. So you have 10 pieces to do. And then I would recommend 5 of your own. Do 3 movies and 2 paintings. So 5 of your own screenshots and paintings and do a study of them. Lastly, you should do 5 of your own pieces, your own personal pieces, and I want you to improve on them. I don't want you to repaint the entire thing in black and white, but I just want you to look at your own piece and then think about, if I could change it and make the black and white value more understandable, how would I do so? And then make that study in the black and white. It doesn't have to be like a repaint. It can be super simple and super quick, but just get your brain thinking about, how can I make my own painting look more clear and understandable? Do I want it to be local value based, or do I want it to be shadow value based? And then maybe you'll realize that, I don't really do a lot of shadow based value in my work. Or maybe you'll go like, my local values have always been really unclear, but I never realized that until I looked at it in black and white. So ask yourself, does your artwork read clear enough in black and white? And if the answer is no, fix it in your simplified painting. If the answer is yes, then perfect, do a study of your original painting. It will be the first step to fantastic painting from here on onwards. And with that, I can't wait to see what you guys come up with. Let us make a toast, because this is to finishing our first lesson and to foolproof concept painting from here on.